The reason that's been so important to me is because as we've grown, I've been able to look at other people being in faith and say, I can continue to walk this journey, what God's called me to. It's different than what it looks like for them, but it's the same principles and it's really the same call, just looks differently.
Yes. Welcome to this week's Wealth Builders Podcast. Again, we are always so happy that you join us, and we do not take you for granted. You are part of the Wealth Builders family, and we're so blessed that you tune in. I've got a great guest today, Jeff VanderWal. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here as always.
You know, Jeff is the CEO of ClearShift, which is a really amazing company in the automotive industry. Yeah. He does things different. He's the founder and the CEO. And I want to talk today, Jeff, about like how to be that effective CEO. And usually when we start out as an entrepreneur, which you are, and many of you listening are, you have these dreams one day to be a bigger company, and Jeff has walked through that. And so, Jeff, maybe share with us a little bit about how you went through that process, because we have this mini book, by the way, that's called The Leader Manager, and you can get a free download of this. You can go to wealthbuilders.org/leader manager, and it's really in line with what Jeff's going to be sharing with us today. But as an entrepreneur, you started out what we call as a technician, because you had to kind of know what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I think that was easy for me. So as a doer, I knew very early on, even when I was a little kid, that the automotive industry really was attractive to me, but just not in the way in which it was done. And so I had to find a way to do it a little bit outside the box. I can honestly tell you, and this may resonate with some of your listeners in your audience, is that like for me, I always looked at things different than everybody else. Like I didn't realize that, but I always looked at how could this be better? What could we do more effectively? This seems clunky, how we did this.
You sound like you were a serious child.
Well, no, this is when I got older. Sorry,
okay.
No.
Like,
when I was a little kid, I was just running Tonka trucks around. So yeah, no, definitely not. But when I got like into my late teens, and I started actually doing cars when I was like 15 years old, and so I'm not at a dealership, but just like selling them on my own, fixing them up, and that stuff. So I learned quickly how to do these things. So, but I always knew I wanted to do it different. I realized that during that process, I knew I was going to work for myself. I knew in my heart, I didn't know how I was going to get there. I knew like when I was 20, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know how or why, or I knew why, but I didn't know how or where I was going to get the resources or how that was going to go. And I wasn't worried about that. What I was concerned about at the time was how to be really good at what I was doing. So as a technician, I got very, very good at being a technician in the automotive industry. And to the point to where, in my 20s, I was making significant money. And so that really was the building blocks for me to be able to start my business.
So cool.
And so I didn't really understand. I knew I was going to have to do that, but I didn't really understand at the time, being a technician, how much that was going to be, how valuable that was going to be, that stewardship time when I got, further down the road in my business.
And so a technician, just so everybody understands with those terms, a technician is the person, how would you describe that?
Yeah, so they're the one doing the tasks, right? They're the people, they're the business end of the transaction. They're the ones that if you're in a sales role, even if you have like an HVAC company or something, they're the ones that are either installing the products, selling the products. They're out doing the ground game, so to speak, of the business is a technician. And then the next level would be a manager, who are basically managing the technicians. But it's really hard to be a manager of something that you don't understand, right? So the maturation process is to be a very good technician, operating at excellence, understanding how the thing works.
Yes.
And then ultimately turning into the manager, and then so on and so forth from there.
And go to that leader.
Yes.
So that's really encouraging too, because I think a lot of people listening, they are at that place. They really enjoy what they're doing. They're getting good at it, but maybe looking to the future, like there's got to be something more.
Yeah.
And at that point, when you were the technician and you were really good, did you see where God had you going at this point, like this many years later? Or was it really you were just focused on that and then it was more step by step? Without
question, it was step by step. I think if I'm not even being sarcastic, I think if God would have showed me all the things that were to come in the next 20 years, I probably would have died. Like, I don't know. I don't even know if I could have.
Could have handled it.
I would have just been like,
frozen.
It's
what?
too much, right? So And I think that's true with everybody, right? I think if you look back at your life and see everything that was going to happen, you probably would have been just frozen in what is this the right step? Is that the right step? How am I going to ultimately get there? So it's like driving to the mountains. It's like I see the mountain range I'm going to. I don't know exactly the road I'm going to take. I know I'm going there. I just don't know what the journey is going to be.
So good.
So, and I'll also say that there are certain organizations, like somebody's a CPA, right? And they're really good at being a CPA and they got 2 or 3 people. It's okay to be a technician and a CPA and run that business. And if that's where your heart is, and God's not calling you to
It's a good point.
take 10 pounds and shove it into a 5-pound bag, and be out of order. If God's not calling you to do that, that's okay, right?
That's so good.
God will bless you. He will bring increase to your life. And then, as you figure other things out in your life, you might end up, doing other things with your time or whatever. So growth is kingdom, multiplication is kingdom, but it doesn't mean you have to be a massive organization. So I think sometimes people feel like they have to do, and you're like, you just have to do what God's calling you to do. And some people are really comfortable there. So I do want to leave place for that.
That's
for sure.
really good, Jeff.
But also, if there's people that are like, well, I feel like it's time for me to move to the next level, right? We just got to the next level conference over the fall, and it was kind of like, that was kind of the word that everyone had, is the next level. How do I get to the next level? So as a technician, you ultimately turn into a leader if you're hiring other people, or excuse me, a manager. So you're managing those people. Let's say you've got 3 employees underneath you and you're managing those people. And there's a maturation process going from just a manager to a manager leader, because you have to cast the vision and connect them to a why. Well, why do we need to go from 3 people to 10 people? Like, I like my job. I'm fine with what I'm doing.
I'm happy with doing this.
Well, I understand that this is the impact we can make. This is the increase that can happen. It gives you opportunity to be able to grow with the company. I've also realized too, like, there's certain people and certain traits that you're going to have that you'll see a spark in them, that they're committed to the vision. And those are people that you want to put in your leadership pipeline. That you want to spend some extra time with, have a coffee with once a month and just try to see where they are, because those are really valuable components to your business as the business grows. So for me, when I was a technician, a very good technician, when I turned into a manager of people, and I was technician and a manager, it was hard for me not to take control of everything. That was probably one of my downfalls as an early young manager, was I kind of would be like, here, just give that to me and I'll fix it. I'll do it.
It's almost easier sometimes.
It is easier, right?
Yeah.
But the person's like, oh, right? They're like, oh, right? So you do that to them 6 or 8 or 10 times, and they're just like, maybe I'm not even good at this. Everything, he has to touch everything. He has to fix everything. So sometimes, as a good manager, you have to let them fail. And it's like, you have to go through the process of, we missed that contract, we missed that deal, but I believe that we've learned something through that. Do you understand what happened? And that's managing, right? And really, that's how the manager then turns into a leader, right? Because we're managing the situation, but now I'm leading them into some understanding, right?
Yes.
So you can do that with a 5-6 person organization. You can be a manager and a leader. There are some fundamentals that go along with how many resources are there. We can't have a CIO and a CEO and a CFO if we have 6 people. It's just not enough resources for all that, right? So we have to understand what's appropriate, but understanding as the company grows that your role needs to change. And so I don't want to spend all our time on that, but I'm happy to jump into some stories of, like, when I went all the way around as the CEO and went to the ground level to fix something, and it threw ripples through the entire organization because people were so afraid. Why is the CEO here? What went wrong? Am I getting fired? I think I'm helping, and I'm actually terrorizing everybody in the organization, because they're like, something must be wrong. Why is Jeff here in Loveland, right? I've never even met him, and he's over here doing something, right? And so I realized that I can get out of order as the leader if I'm jumping back into something that's comfortable, and it makes everybody else uncomfortable. So that's a process to understand those buckets and where you need to operate in.
That is so insightful. And I think people that are entrepreneurs, it is hard to let go, because I'm talking about myself, we feel like no one else could do this, right? The way that I do it. But in that, with a desire to grow and to scale and to see God's vision come to pass with that impact, you have to let go of some things. And so when you When you hit that point that you were no longer able to be a technician, what are some transition points that you made, or what were some things that you had to learn to do different so that you didn't implode your technicians?
Yeah, I think I've made a lot of mistakes, right? So at first by not understanding the difference between the two, but really what ended up happening was we got so busy that I couldn't anymore. So I almost got forced out of it because I was like, I'm gonna, so just for some context, when we started the business, I wasn't walking with the Lord. I was a Christian, but had no relationship with Jesus. And so I was born again, but no fruit. And so I had all of this on my shoulders. And so by default, it just turned into, I can't do it anymore. It's just going to have to work out the way it's going to work out. And it was kind of just throw it against the wall and see what sticks. Unfortunately, that's kind of where we were.
Amazing.
But God's really good and patient, kind. He's so
needed that actually.
And so through that process, that's probably when we had like 15 people, right, in the organization. And so as we went from like 15 to 30, that was really that process where I'm like, okay, we started putting some structure in place, and even as dysfunctional as it was, it did still have some good structure to it. So for me, moving out from a technician to a manager, one of the benefits is, it sounds like I'm negative about moving from there. It's actually a huge positive if you're a great technician, because you, as a manager, you can have insight into the situation, immediately diagnose it and teach through it. So it's a huge benefit to have those tools in your tool belt, so to speak. But ultimately, you need to be able to do it with multiple people, training, and understanding, right? So as your company's growing, understanding that moving to a manager is, you're not a doer, but now you can multiply what you know in 6, 8, 10, 12, 15.
I like that. You can multiply.
Exactly. That's how it works, right? Because I can only do so much. I can work 18 hours a day, but I can only do them one at a time. But if I can get 10 people to understand what God's shown me and understand just my time in the saddle has taught me, then I've got 10 people. And even if they're only operating at 50% of what I understand to begin with, that's still way more productive than what I can do myself. So that's just that process of letting them make mistakes, because it grows organically. Mark IV talks about the farmer plants the seed. He doesn't know how it grows, but it does grow. And then it's first the blade, then the head, then the full grain in the head. That's that process. When you start to multiply your knowledge into people, and you're gonna, like Billy talks about, you got to keep sowing, right? Some birds are gonna get some. The seed's gonna get some. But if you keep sowing, that's where that intangible increase comes from. And that's where kingdom multiplication
comes in. Good. And we're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. And a lot of times we just look at that in the context of family, which of course it is. We want to be fruitful, multiply in family, but it's really in business and kingdom impact as well. Amen. I really like that analogy you said, with like, if they're at 50%, even of where you're at, think of the multiplication. So tell us a story about like when you, Jeff has really great stories. Tell us a story about a time where you did sort of like jump in, and how did you get yourself back aligned to be that manager? So I love these stories.
So, and bless my heart. So when we had several locations at this point, and we were really growing, and we had a lot of young people that were in our system, right? And so again, we're in the automotive industry, so we have people coming in the door buying cars, And so one day I just decided on a Saturday, I'm going to be a blessing, and I'm going to show up at one of our stores, and I'm going to have my Clear Shift shirt on, and I'm going to help them sell cars. Show them how it's done, right? But not in a way of like, making them feel bad. Your intentions
were good, right?
Just like wanted to help them, right? Well, they're all like, all of the people in your podcast, people are listening, can't see my face. They're wide-eyed and they're like, "What's Jeff doing here?" And I don't think of myself as like, I think it's good to be humble. I don't look at myself as that I've arrived or something as CEO, but I recognize that some people that you've never met or just started, or they've only seen me on video, how I didn't realize at the time, but they were intimidated. And I don't feel like I'm an intimidating person, but I understand if you're 24 and you've never met me before, how it's like, why is the CEO here? This is not normal. So anyway.
Who's in trouble?
Yes, exactly. So I go in there and I'm like talking to customers and I'm helping and I'm loving it because I'm good at it. And it's kind of like a pressure release for me to hang out with these people. Well, anyway, I thought we had a great day. And I was telling Jen, my wife, I'm like, we have such a great day. Well, Monday morning I have my leadership meetings, and my COO came in and he's like, hey, so let's talk about Friday or Saturday, whatever the day was. And I'm like, yeah, well, it was awesome. He goes, here's the deal, man. He's like, you need to understand that everybody's freaked out. And they were so nervous that everybody is just, there's something wrong. Like, what's going on? Why would you do that? And so I just missed it, Karen, so bad, thinking I was helping. And I wasn't really. And so I realized if I'm going to train the team at this point, right?
Yes.
We need to have set up times where they have chairs and I can come in and I can talk to them one-on-one, but it needs to be in a setting that is structured. At this point, I can't just wing it with them because they don't understand why I'm there. And so I was pretty tone deaf on that. I learned a really good lesson that day. I want to still be around them, and I want to show them my heart. I want them connected to the vision. I want them to know that I care about them. I value them. But it has to be in a way in which it can't just be, me and the guys, like a breakfast burrito selling some cars. It doesn't work like that anymore,
There's a term for that. Like, you just came in like a helicopter, landed like a helicopter. No one knew why you were there.
So, whoops, I felt bad. So that can happen. I mean, and as the company grows and as your role changes, it just kind of happens. It's like, we were talking before about, your shoes. You just kind of grow into them.
Yeah.
And the Lord's always going to put you in a place of faith. So sometimes faith is going from 2 to 3 people. Sometimes it's going from 6 to 7 to 10, whatever. Mm-hmm. But then sometimes you look up and you've gone from 5 to, 50 or 100. And through that process, God's grace is weaved into, you've got faith where you're going and where God's calling you to go. But it's like bowling with bumpers, right? When the bumpers come out, that's where his grace comes in. And he's like, nope. But he's going to keep you in the lane if you're walking with him.
So good. Wow. So it's nothing to be afraid of, and it's nothing to rush.
That's right.
But it's something to just definitely steward, right? And I know that you are around, you take time to get educated. You're around people that are maybe where you want to go. And I think that's a big thing too. Yep. So how much have you learned, for example, from mentors or people that you've just said, hey, you know what? I think I want to be around this person.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I it's like 2015-ish or so, I was really struggling, and I won't get into the whole story today. I think people may have heard it earlier episodes, but I was really struggling. That I love the Lord, but I was really struggling to understand His love for me and what my purpose was, and I was under a lot of condemnation. And so I started praying in my daily prayer life. I was like, Lord, I need a mentor. I need like a father figure. I need people in my life. And it went for a couple of years where it didn't really happen, right? But I knew that was a real need in my life. When I got turned on to the Lord, again, I was so excited. That was like 2018. But what I've realized is that I've submitted myself under people's teaching. Billy Epperhart, I never knew Billy personally, but I knew his teachings. So I sat myself under Billy's teaching, and Billy was a mentor of mine before I even met Billy.
That is a really good key point there, Jeff.
So I just, because I don't need to know him personally to have him impact my life deeply.
Good.
He came up to me for school one day and was like, "Hi, I'm Billy." I'm like, "I know who you are." We just ended up talking.
You've been mentoring me. You just didn't know it.
Exactly. Same with Andrew and others that really submitted my life to. Well, now it's amazing because I've got several mentors in my life that are in a place where they're further along than I am in their walk with the Lord. They're further along in their ministry, further along in their business. In different categories. But the reason that's been so important to me is because as we've grown, I've been able to look at other people being in faith and say, I can continue to walk this journey, what God's called me to. It's different than what it looks like for them, but it's the same principles and it's really the same call, just looks differently.
Yes.
So having mentors, asking the Lord for mentors, but it doesn't mean that you need to pursue them or kick open a door necessarily. If you'll submit yourself to what God has for you, He will open doors. And it may be people that you don't think, right? You might be thinking it's going to be so-and-so, and it's actually this other person, and it's a real blessing. So I think that was a key for me to understand that I didn't have to have a personal relationship with them. I needed to just understand where their heart was and then receive from them. And God, started to do some amazing things.
That is so amazing. And so another question for you is, how much do you need to do to keep up with the industry And what are your sources that you look for to be able to make sure that you're staying on top of things from an industry perspective?
It's huge. My industry, like any others, there's moving parts. There's interest rates, there's consumer demand, there's there's ebbs and flows of the marketplace. So it's very similar to like what you would expect in like real estate. We're just highly transactional. Your business is less transactional than mine. It's a slower moving process. Ours takes 2 hours to buy a car. It takes 45 days to buy a house, right? It's just way more transactional.
Yes.
So it happens faster. But I can tell you that I've been on both sides of the ditch in this, Karen. I have read statistics and looked into things ad nauseum to the point where I get into fear, and I'm like, this doesn't sound good, right? Like we're in 2024 right now, and there's no shortage of craziness going on in our world. And so you can get so far down that rabbit hole that you're paralyzed with fear. So you got to go back to like, what's God calling me to do? And even if the industry says that's not the way things are going, it can absolutely happen. I've been known to short sell the market at times and go, I know everyone going that way, I'm going that way. And it's worked out tremendously well. So I think it's wise to steward what's happening. What's my carrying cost going to be on this? Like, I need to understand what that is. Jesus said, count the cost. You got to count the cost. Doesn't mean you're going to know everything, but really I think what he's getting at is count the cost in your heart. Are you willing to give up what you know and maybe some of the things you don't know in order to go where I'm calling you to go? You may have to sacrifice some things that you originally didn't think you're going to have to sacrifice, right?
So good, Jeff.
Those are those costs. But you need to know enough to be an expert and to be able to know what you're talking about and lead your people, but you need to stay out of it enough and stay in the word enough to understand that God's word is going to supersede my circumstances. So there's real facts, right? And there's where God's calling you, and then you need to get at peace with both of those things to be able to walk out what God's calling you.
That's so good. There's the how-to, but it's all definitely that kingdom and what God is showing you, and then to be a good steward. Like for real estate, for example, I can't just say, well, God called me to be a real estate agent and I'm just going to jump out there and I'm going to start doing transactions. There's laws, right? There's education you have to have. And that's what you're explaining. There is that. But then if you go too deep in it where it starts to like cause you to think you can't do something that God's called you to do, that is a really, really good balance. Jeff, by the way, how many employees do you have?
So right now we have about 75.
Oh, wow.
Give or take to the day.
Yeah, it moves around a bit.
Sometimes we hire them, sometimes people go. But so I think we're at 75 or 80 as of the beginning of this week. So.
That's a good sized organization. And in that, as the CEO, I was just asking Jeff before we went live, like, how do you handle the stress of that?
Yeah.
And because there are lives, right? There is the day-to-day, there's cash flow, there's all these things. And when I talk to you, like, you're so calm. You've got all this responsibility. So please share with us.
So I mean, I think on the outside looking in, I think it was actually more difficult to manage at maybe like 25 people.
Interesting.
Than it was at 75 people. And the reason is because at 25 people, I was everything to everybody.
So good.
Everybody had my cell phone number. Everybody could just knock on my door, pop in, right? And
you knew everybody's name.
Exactly. And I knew their wives and I knew their kids and I knew, all this. So for me, it's like sometimes it's difficult because when you're having a personal relationship with everybody, not that you don't care. I think you understand what I'm saying.
I do. I totally
care about all my employees. However, when everybody has direct access, it's almost like you'll lose sleep over it. You have to separate with somebody because sometimes, Karen, it's just not the right fit. And they might be a great person and you may have a great organization, but sometimes we have to understand that the piece may be off something, like something the end of something because God has something better for them.
So
and the faith element comes in. We have to believe that if the piece isn't here anymore and this isn't a good fit anymore, I have to believe God enough to let them go. And they may understand it at the time and they may not. Yeah. But I have to believe that God's got something for them. So that was a great learning experience for me at 25 people because of the amount of personal connection. Now that the company's larger and we have more people in place, I don't really have those tough conversations nearly as much as my high-level leadership people do, right? So director of operations have to have those tougher conversations. And a quick little side note on that is hire people like the leader manager will tell you this, hire people that really highlight your weaknesses. So if you got some strengths,
great advice.
So for me, like somebody that's highly organized and loves systems and processes is really good, right? Because I don't really love those things. We need them, but I'm not great at them. So somebody like that's like, it's black and white, right? They're like, well, they missed their PIP 3 different times, performance improvement plan, and it's not working out anymore. And so that's it. And so long answer to your question, but ultimately the game slows down, the organization slows down, and it gets easier to manage on a daily basis because even though there's more responsibility because you have other people to help.
That is so good. Wow. And just a reminder that you can get a hold of this book by Billy Epperhart. It's a mini book. It's called The Leader Manager. Go to wealthbuilders.org/leader manager. Also, I want to let you know we've got this amazing event that's coming up just this week of when we're airing, and it is a vacation rental intensive seminar. And Bill Bronchek and I were doing that together with Wealth Builders, and we're saying it's for fun and for profit. So we may not have any tickets in person left at the time of this podcast airing, but you can join us by live stream. Go to wealthbuilders.org/events. And then finally, I want to just remind you that Jeff is going to be one of the speakers at the Wealth Builders Conference. And I've already asked him if he would just share on this perspective of a CEO. So Jeff, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, I just want to encourage people, keep going with where God's calling you to go. Growing your business is a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So this is a great place to get connected to help you along your journey.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And thanks all of you for joining us each and every week. We really appreciate you. God bless and have an amazing rest of the day.